All right, so I am going to call the Capital Planning Committee meeting to order for Monday, July 26th, 2021 at 7:30 p.m. Pursuant to Senate Bill number 2475, which was signed into law by Governor Baker on June 16th, 2021, this meeting of the Capital Planning Committee will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information, the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and/or parties with a right and/or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the Town of Southborough's website at www.southboroughtown.com. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch or participate in the meeting may do so in the following manner by finding the meeting at www.southboroughtown.com/remote meetings. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event they were unable to do so, despite best efforts, we'll post on Southborough's website an audio or video recording transcript or other comprehensive record of the proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. With that, I will note that we are all present and am happy to welcome our newest member, Karen Wheeler, who was appointed by the BOS a few weeks ago. So Karen, I don't know if you want to provide a brief introduction of yourself to the rest of the committee members. I know we had a chance to talk prior to your appointment, but I think the rest of the committee would benefit from understanding your background and why you're interested in joining.
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone. Let's see, I've been interested in joining the committee because I have a little bit more time on my hands and am interested in contributing locally to our community. My professional background has been in finance. I'm a CPA and I have, I worked in public accounting for a handful of years and then worked in the corporate sector for another chunk of time in financial positions. And for the past 10 years, I'd say I've been working in the nonprofit sector in finance. And my current position is Director of Finance Administration for a small nonprofit in Boston called Second Nature. And this organization focuses on climate action in the higher education sector. And the organization is small enough that I'm able to do my job in about 3 days a week. So that's what's freed up some of my time to devote to other things that I'm interested in. So I'm thank you for welcoming me, and I'm happy to be here.
Any questions for Karen?
No.
All right.
Welcome aboard.
So with that, we have 3 sets of minutes to approve this evening. So I will start with June 21st. Are there any comments on those?
Sorry, I was on mute. I think I said a couple of small typos.
Go ahead, Jeff.
So Andrew, on page 2, the section update on requests related to oversight responsibility. There's just an extraneous word, stated he besides the discussion.
He has had discussions.
No.
What did you say?
Mr. Malinsky stated he besides the discussion we had on the.
Oh, okay.
And then the last thing I had was just in literally the last sentence of the review of space needs RFQ, just a spelling typo for within. Right above public comment. That's it.
There are also 2 places where it says public comment. One on 2 and one on 3.
We did have 2 of them.
Okay, we did. Oh, good for you. Good for you for catching it then.
Or at least Jason asked. Nobody spoke up. But
Yeah, I think there was we had an interesting structure to that meeting, and I think I tried to move it up because we were waiting, I believe, for Miss Galligan at that point in time. My only comment, Andrew, I think under the references to supporting documentations, I think we just need to list out the firms. I know you indicate 5 and it's kind of clear from above, but just on submitting minutes to the clerk's office, they tend to like to be able to collate what's in the folder to obviously what's at the bottom. So if we can just type out the 5 firms' names, I go alphabetical order. That's probably the best way to do it.
Okay, I'll do that.
There any other comments in those minutes? So Karen, we're going to have to do a roll call vote on each of these minutes. You are welcome to abstain if given that you obviously weren't on the committee, or you're also welcome to vote if you watch the meeting and think it's an accurate depiction. It's up to you. When we get to you, I usually go in alphabetical order and I usually go at the end just so you're prepared. So I will move that we accept the minutes with the edits as suggested. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All right, roll call. Braccio,
Aye.
Hark. Jeff, I didn't hear you. It might have been me.
I said aye, sorry.
Palmer,
Aye.
Pfaff,
Aye.
Wheeler,
Abstain.
and Malinowski's aye. So that's going to be 501. Next are July 7th. Any comments on those? I was thinking on these that we should again reference the same submissions that we had on the meeting before, just because there are multiple references during the actual interview process about the RFQs that they had submitted and people referenced back to them.
Jason, I had one. Oh, sorry. Nope. Sorry. That was on the next set of minutes. Apologize.
Okay.
I will make those changes and resubmit.
Any other comments before I move that set? I move that we approve the July 7th minutes with the one edit as suggested. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All right, roll call vote. Braccio,
Aye.
Hark,
Aye.
Palmer,
Aye.
Pfaff,
Aye.
Wheeler,
Abstain.
and Malinowski is aye. So that's again 501. All right, July 8th, 2021. Go ahead, Lisa.
Okay, thank you. Under discussion of the town space needs RFQ, on the second page, Schwartz and Silver needs a space between them, and Silver should be capitalized.
Done.
And just lastly, under Townhouse RFQ update, Esposito has an O. ESPO, SITA.
I will never, I can promise I will never get her name right. I don't know why. It is. We know that. This is what, the 3rd time now?
That's all. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
My question was around the actual documents reference. Surprise, surprise again.
Okay.
Joe, what did you mean by proprietary information? Because I don't think anything's proprietary in public records.
I can understand you're saying that, although I think each of the individual firms, when they submitted their RFQ forms, some of them, like DRA, had specific models that they used in the way that they evaluated and then presented it to people. So I would say that the style of the forms that they used would have been a proprietary model for themselves. It wasn't that I was making them exclusive in knowledge. It's just that that's what the firm uses.
But wouldn't that be captured by just saying the RFQ? Like each firm gave us one package, right? What
I
they
don't mind.
chose to submit.
Jason, I don't mind if you want me to just remove it. We'll just remove it and go.
I think that would be my preference, but I welcome
Okay,
the thoughts of
no problem.
others.
Let's just pop it right out and go. This is not, we have more important fish to fry than this one.
So I'm gonna recommend we streamline that to one item again.
No worries.
And just be the RFQ response materials if everyone's good with that.
All good.
The only other thing I noted was under attendance, we seem to be inconsistent of how we deal with our ex officio members. Sometimes we list just who's present. Sometimes we list who's present and absent. I don't really have a view as long as we note who was present. So I think the last set we just looked at, I think one of them wasn't present. So I just want to be consistent. I think it was the first set, sorry, June one. I don't remember what we've been doing, to be completely honest, but any comments? Any other comments?
I have just two small ones. On Townhouse RFQ update, just ensure is EN, not IN. The last sentence. Mr. will ask the committee to ensure Mr. Parent be involved.
Oh, yep.
And the last one, just minor, but adjournment. Add PM next to 8:17.
Sure.
Any other comments? All right, then I'll move we accept those minutes with the discussed edits. Is there a second?
Second.
I think Jeff seconded.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Is it me or is it? I saw Jeff's mouth move, but
It was faint. It was faint.
okay. All right.
Second.
I got Jeff on a second. Any further discussion? All right. Roll call vote. Braccio,
Aye.
Hark,
Aye.
Palmer,
Aye.
Pfaff,
Aye.
Wheeler,
Jane,
and Malinowski is aye. All right. So I put reorganization of the committee twice. So I decided to go with the second time I had it. I was doing a little copy and paste as I did the agenda and couldn't figure out what order to do it in. So I figured we'd tackle the admin first. So I know I've said this now twice when we've had new years or new members join. I think it's incumbent that the committee regularly revisit who holds the chair, vice chair, and clerk role and determine who should hold those roles. So given that everyone was either just reappointed at the beginning of the month or appointed during the month, I believe now is the right time to consider our structure. So with that, I will entertain a discussion around chair.
Jason, if you're happy to continue to be chair, I'm happy to nominate you to be chair.
I would be willing to continue unless someone else wants the opportunity.
I would second that nomination.
Yeah, we are in good hands with you. Got the helm.
All right, so I have a motion and I have a second. Is there any discussion? All right, this needs a roll call vote. Braccio,
Aye.
Hark,
Aye.
Palmer,
Aye.
Pfaff,
Aye.
Wheeler,
aye.
and Malinowski is going to be abstain. Vice Chair, any nominations?
Jason, who's currently the vice chair?
Andrew is currently our Vice Chair, and Kathy was until she resigned.
I'd be happy again with the structure we have. I'd be happy to nominate Andrew if he wishes to continue.
It sounds like a motion to me. Lisa, is that a motion? Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Any discussion or any other parties interested in that position? All right, roll call vote. Braccio,
Aye.
Hark,
Aye.
Palmer,
Aye.
Pfaff,
Abstain?
Wheeler,
Aye.
and Malinowski is aye. We also need a clerk. I have a motion there.
Again, who currently is the clerk? I apologize.
Jeff.
I should know.
Jeff, but full disclosure, a good majority of the committee members have been helping out with the minutes along the way, but Jeff is on paper to make sure we get all our minutes in a timely manner, regardless of who has the authorship right now.
Great, thank you. I nominate Jeff, if he so continues, to be clerk. And again, we appreciate everything, Jeff, for the clerk position.
There a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Given Lisa is here, I'll just use this as an opportunity. You know the length of some of these committees meetings, and you know the amount of effort that goes into some of these minutes, depending upon the substance that we're dealing with. So this committee does not have a budget. We have not advocated for a budget for a minute taker, but I would just ask, as a committee that regularly has meetings that are long, for some sort of equity in how meeting minute takers are distributed throughout the town, given it's falling on a bunch of volunteers right now. All right. Anyone else have anything to add? All right. Roll call vote. Braccio,
Aye.
Hark,
I'll abstain.
Palmer,
Aye.
Pfaff,
Aye.
Wheeler,
Aye.
and Malinowski is aye. All right. Now, in Joe's words, we can get into some of the other stuff. So I have a very brief chairs/members update. I'll handle school research, and I imagine Andrew/Joe will handle the next one. There have been no public meetings of the school research subcommittee, but I just want to use this opportunity to let the committee know that that subcommittee is going to start meeting pretty regularly. For those of you that were monitoring that discussion, I had a brief discussion with the superintendent last week about where they stand on some of the educational policy items that they were looking into, as well as a separate demographic study. And he's about ready to make some presentations back to that subcommittee. So you will see as early as late next week, that committee getting reinvigorated. The goal is to wrap up the work, hopefully this calendar year, to determine, what decisions can or can't be made. Obviously, that's a very important decision for the town. So I think that subcommittee released a letter in conjunction with the school committee and BOS, about a month ago, I feel like it was, and no one's going to rush to the decision, but the pieces of the puzzle are coming together enough to allow, in particular, the school committee to make informed decisions around whatever that subcommittee presents back. So more of an FYI. Any questions on that? Shopsy South Union Subcommittee, Andrew or Joe?
I'm going to cover that one, Joe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure. So we had our first initial meeting. Tom Biscuitel is from Shopsy, is the chair of that committee. The next meeting's in I think a month or so we have a little bit of time before the next one. But the kind of the initial plan / strategy is to look at possibly using the housing authority and getting some funding from the state. I think we're going to try to have a meeting with somebody from the DHCD sometime in September to discuss what the funding options and different processes there are. But it sounds relatively hopeful. We're also working with Sarah in the planning office to understand the impacts of the MBTA Chapter 3A host community zoning that came out in January, and Karen, for just I think the rest of the committee has heard this, but there was a ruling that came out in January with this year's one of the acts this year that mandated any community that's part of what they call the MBTA communities, of which Southborough is one because we had the commuter rail, must adopt a multifamily by right zoning within a half mile of the train station, subway station, commuter rail station, whatever it is. So we're trying to maybe classify the South Union parcel as that, and then convert the building into an affordable housing property under the authority of the Southborough Housing Authority, like Colonial Gardens. So kind of kill two birds with one stone with that piece of property, but still very initial in the thoughts there, but starting to make some progress.
Yeah, that's good to hear, Andrew. Thank you.
So Andrew, can I ask a question, Jason? So Andrew, just to be clear, that if we partnered with the housing authority, then any renovations that would be done there would be funded through the state, just as Colonial Gardens, correct?
Correct. I think it actually, the housing authority would take it over after the town did any development. They would take over the ability to run it. But basically the town would get the money, do the renovations, develop it into apartments or, subdivide the property and add apartments or townhouses or something, whatever is decided, because it's a pretty big parcel. And then, basically would turn it over to the housing authority to run it. But the idea is to get money from either the DHCD, from their funds, some of the federal funds that are available, and maybe the ARP funds that the state has as another funding source, because it covers affordable housing as well. And it just has to be housing fit for families in order to classify for that zoning. So it sounds like there's some traction there and a good use case. And there still is some CPC fundings for housing that hasn't really been touched, that if there's a gap or something, it's a possibility to see if the town would approve that use of that funds, but nobody's used that for a while. So it might be a good use of that. But, only time will tell how that ends up playing out, but some traction there. And it seems like it's getting some legs.
Great, thank you, Andrew.
And go ahead, Karen.
Andrew, does this mean that the affordable housing will just be the structure that's there, or it will be expanded to something else that could fit on the property?
It depends. I think the general idea is we would certainly keep the South Union building. But it's about a 4-acre parcel, and that area there is the half-acre zoning. So there's a couple parcels there that maybe you turn and you put a small townhome or a multifamily, two-family kind of thing, or just a small house, a 2-bedroom 1-bath house or something. If the town decided that they wanted to increase the housing capacity, but there's certainly space for it. But again, since it's in the town's control, kind of makes it easy to kind of get the feedback from everybody and do something that's good for the town, good for the neighborhood, good for the the abutters, and is a nice package.
Yeah. Okay.
Andrew,
Thank you.
I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here, but in looking at the ADA document that we're going through later today, would the funding from the state cover anything that needs to be done to get that up?
The building is actually pretty ADA compliant. Mark might know better than me, but it has an elevator and a lot of other things.
I thought I still saw some significant cost to get it up to code though. Maybe I looked at the wrong one, but
The playground definitely was where most of that cost was.
Yeah.
okay.
But I think one of the findings of the ADA was not every playground needed to be ADA compliant. Most towns can't afford to do them all. So, but maybe that was something we'd look at with that playground, or pick one of the other ones that maybe is being refurbished sooner than that. But
okay.
I'm sure if we do any renovations, that would certainly come into play.
Anything else on that before we move on? So Andrew, Joe, I'm just going to keep this on the agenda. If you don't have an update, you don't have an update. If you have an update like that, we'll obviously continue to entertain them. So I'm going to go to space needs designer contract status and potential approval of scope and fee. So obviously everyone's aware of the recommendation we made to the BOS related to DRA. The Board of Selectmen approved that recommendation. And Mark and I had a preliminary conversation with Ken and Courtney, who were the two also that appeared before us for the interview. We walked through a bunch of things. They definitely had questions on what we had been up to. If you remember, though, they were the firm that I think we all kind of believed had the best handle on what Southborough had been up to. So we gave them a status update on things that they couldn't find full details on. Then we very quickly pivoted towards contracting, timeline, fees, logistics of how they're going to start their discussions with department heads. I'm happy to report that as of this afternoon, there's pretty much everything has been buttoned up from a contracting perspective. So I just wanted to first thank Mark, but also our town council. Basically, just so everyone understands the process, Mark provided a approved template to DRA. DRA then, so basically our legal counsel was already okay with all the terminology. DRA came back with a few suggestions. And then this afternoon, our town council signed off on the proposed changes. So from a legal perspective, that part is handled. What I view our role is on the fee and on the scope. So in the folder, I did update and include what they would call their deliverables that would come out of the process for the fee that we agreed to. It's a short one pager, but it went through a bunch of back and forth, which is why it wasn't ready, days ago. But I don't know if anyone's had a chance to look at it. You want me to walk you through it? The one thing I will say, the reason for some of the back and forth was they're planning to give us floor plans of our buildings with like what they could look like. Like, let's just say town administrator's office, right, needs to increase or decrease space, and the staff that supports the town administrator, how you could potentially position that within a building. While there are certainly buildings that are going to stay in our inventory, there are also buildings that may not stay in our inventory, and they plan to make a specific recommendation around that. The wild card I talked to them about was what we all know, right? Is that, the school, right? Is there going to be a school or not? Or are we going to have to accommodate these needs using other buildings, whether it be a building in the town's control or not? So I didn't want to be committing to doing a floor plan on X, Y, or Z building until one, we understood the space needs and how much space certain departments were looking for, and that we could really vet that first. And then we can give it a month or two, which is what the superintendent thinks he needs, on the larger buildings that could potentially become available, so that we actually have them mark up a building that we can actually use, as opposed to paying someone to put floor plans together of buildings that are not in our control or the ability control. Vice versa, if we don't have a school or another building, we as a committee need to go identify where that space would be, and or is there a problem we're trying to solve for, right? That's, at the top of the priority list of the town. So what we agreed to was that there would be, pending committee recommendations, an initial review of really the true space needs of these departments, so that we can all align that Department A wasn't aggressive or was too aggressive with what they asked for, right? Here, Ken and Courtney's recommendations. Department B, same thing. What does that come out to? And what do we have now versus what are we looking to do? So we were going to phase it and pretty much solidify the needs first, and then start working through the what ifs, all of which still would be covered under this deliverables list in the fee, which they have, not surprisingly, suggested that we go with the 20,000, not to exceed 20,000 that was in the RFQ. So I'll open it, I guess. Let's talk about deliverables first, and then we can come to the fee. There are any questions, comments, concerns with that listing?
Jason, I like the deliverables. One thing that did come up in our CHOPSy kind of conversation was trying to get a space needs of South Union in terms of what could you fit in there from an affordable housing concept. Obviously, that would be, additional scope for DRA, but it might be something that while they're there under the hood with that information, we might look to add a supplemental change request or something. I'm not sure how that would work, Mark, but it was just a thought we had.
So I think you could do that similar to what was happening or what's happening now with the ADA study. So we did a contract with the vendor for the ADA study of all the town buildings. And then a lot of that was offset by a grant from Mass Office of Disability. So we had additional funding that was remaining. And I always thought the school had their Title II study done, but they didn't. So we added in all of the school buildings. We did that as an addendum. So
Okay.
what I would suggest is, if you're going to do something like that, add it in as an addendum, which is, something other, beyond what you've asked for in the scope. So, but yeah, you could do that fairly simply.
Okay.
And you can pay for that, out of either trust fund or SHOPSy or some other funds as
Yeah.
well.
Or even admin funds from CPC or something like that.
Sure.
So Mark, we can take that back and ask the question for sure. I guess my only question on that end as well, I'm very supportive of that. I think the question Mark should ask is, do they have the qualifications to do that? Like, have they done projects like that before from an affordable housing perspective? I didn't go back, obviously, open up their RFQ, but I think it'd be a pretty simple thing for them to say yes or no to. Any other comments on the deliverables?
I had a minor question. In reading this, the we is when they, like in number one, it says we will provide. Is that us or them?
I think it's we, meaning DRA, will provide to the town.
Okay. Just so I just want to make sure I read it correctly.
Okay. All right. So on the fee, like I said, they of course went with the number that had been included in the RFQ for a not to exceed amount, which they pretty much indicated was a very low price for what they would typically charge for that. But they obviously knew it when they bid on the study and realized the potential that could exist. The one thing I did talk to Ken about specifically, though, was what if, depending upon what happens, right, with the buildings and where we decide to go, what we hear, right? If we decide not to do floor plans for some reason, or we decide we need to go multiple different directions, really, phasing the billing, especially if we have to put a hold at some point in the process here. And he was amenable to that. We talked about somewhat like a 75% fee, to be paid at some point right upon completion of like the initial, square footage analysis, and then, the remaining 25% on the back end with floor plans, et cetera. Obviously, they're going to have a significant amount of cost over the next couple of weeks interviewing all of these department heads and compiling their deliverables. Any questions on the fee, comments, concerns about it? Okay. Mark, do you want to vote from us just to support the deliverables and fee structure?
Yeah, I think it'd be good to have that on the, that be on the record before I send that off to the vendor.
Okay, then I will
So-
move that.
So
Go ahead, Andrew.
Jason, real quick. So this is fixed bid, right? Not time and materials.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And then obviously we can do addendums down the
Yeah.
road if the town decides to do something beyond
Yeah.
what we've been asked to do.
Sounds good.
And I did also confirm that there's more than enough room for that still in the capital article from a year and a half ago as well. There'll still be not a lot left, but there will be some amount left after paying, the full fee. All right, with that, I'm going to move that we approve the space needs designer contract for DRA with the provided deliverable scope and a fixed fee of $20,000. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion? Sorry, I heard Joe first on that one for the second. Any further discussion?
Do we approve it, or do we recommend that the selectmen, like, just from the language of it?
When I didn't say approve contract, right, Mark? I said approve the deliverable scope
Yeah.
and fee.
Right.
Does that cover you?
That
What you were
covers me.
looking for?
Okay.
No,
I have-
fine with that.
I have motion to approve the space needs designer contract for DRA with provided deliverable scope. That's what I heard as well.
All right, so I'll just clarify that it relates to the recommendations around the deliverable and fee, and that Mr. Purple is Chief Procurement Officer, will deal with all contractual language. All right, any further discussion? All right, roll call, Brascio,
Aye.
Hark,
Aye.
Palmer,
Aye.
Pfaff,
Aye.
Wheeler,
I,
and Malinowski is aye. All right, the next is ARPA funds. So Andrew had asked for this to be on the agenda, but I also wanted to remind the committee that we also received an email that had been forwarded from Representative Dykema's office, I believe, that they are looking for ideas from communities related to the state level funds. And also, I think there's also a lot of discussion of potential uses of town funds. And I know there's a lot of guidance that has continued to come out about what you can and can't do with the funds. So Andrew, maybe I'll let you go first with whatever you were looking to discuss, and then maybe bring it back to the committee more broadly of, is there anything we want to discuss tonight or in future meetings to bring forward with a recommendation for the Board of Selectmen to send some sort of letter, but I imagine, Lisa, you are looking at many things. So, but I think we should be on record if there's some strong view here. So Andrew, I'll go to you first, and then maybe Lisa, come back to you, and then we'll go around to the rest of the committee.
Yeah, I think at least for the Representative Dykema one, I think the email was really targeted to department heads. I mean, we were on it, but I wasn't sure if we wanted to review any of that, or I think there's certainly things within the capital plan, especially from a water and infrastructure standpoint. I think a lot of those, the water tower, the Newton Road, water main, some of those projects certainly could qualify there. But, obviously there's a lot that we have in our capital plan that I don't want to duplicate if a department head had anything. So I don't know if there's anything there we want to view what was submitted and see if there's anything we needed to add to it. And then for the town, the $3 million or so that the town's going to receive, I just think it's, I think that a lot of that money should be used for capital purchases. I think it shouldn't be used to supplement operating budgets or things like that. It's kind of a one-time money that maybe should be used for kind of one-time costs. Just think that certainly the capital planning committee would be the town would be well served to have us kind of review what some of those thought processes and items would be.
Lisa, I'll go to you next.
So just briefly, Andrew, I know the board's looking to, we had gotten some requests in, and I think we had talked a little bit about at our meeting, about the one-stop grant for Route 9. We had talked about a bunch of different things. I think the goal is we were still waiting on getting the final guidelines that came back from the meeting. I believe it was last week. Maybe now it was a week later because we met on Thursday. So the week prior. So I know this is going to be, again, the board's going to want to talk about prioritizing some of the projects, but I think this was a good opportunity for capital advisory and the BOS to put the list together and to look at, what it is that we need, with emphasis, I think, on one of the comments that was said at the BOS meeting specifically was, this is almost like a gift. This is a great opportunity for something that we may or may not have, thought of or been able to do in the past. And with the additional projects that Carolyn's looking for as well. Again, there's so many new guidelines and everything coming out that, all I would suggest is that, again, we are all following this very closely, and obviously anything over $10,000 capital would be involved in anyway. So I think there's plenty of opportunity for all of us to have a say. So I'll just leave it at that for now. I can come back certainly and update. This is something that's going to be on the board's agenda, probably every agenda going forward as well. So thank you.
At least I would just say that makes perfect sense. And I think we're on the same page of just kind of volunteering our services.
Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah,
Thanks,
Jason, just to tag on to what Lisa had said, I think the board is really, there's some conflicting interests right now in terms of what we should do. Should we do 15 small things, or should we take 2 big bites? This is, as Lisa said, it's described as, not a once in a generation, once in a lifetime opportunity. So rather than looking at, a tender, or looking at, buying all new SCBA or doing something like that, do we take a big swing and looking at bringing municipal wastewater, bringing sewer in, to an area of town? Do we look at doing something big, a building, something along those lines? So the board has some ideas. The board's had some thoughts. I know that the finance team has been taking a look at bringing in someone to help us manage the ARPA funds. It does sound kind of weird. We're looking to bring somebody in to manage the ARPA funds that can be paid from the ARPA funds. And so it's, but it is, there are a lot of, it is a lot of money. There are a lot of opportunities. And I think it makes sense, whether it's simply to help manage the funds or whether it's to help us work through the process of, where the funds best may be used based on some of the things that we're looking at doing. So again, as Lisa said, more to come.
I have a question. When we get these funds, are all these funds going to be, are all the, generally the things that we're talking about, are they all going to have to pass through annual meeting?
I'm
All these
going to
expenditures?
say, yeah, I'm going to say, I guess it depends on what it is we're doing, but I think that a lot of them may have to. So we'll have to take a look. We'll have to take a look at that, because again, just because you have the money doesn't mean you may not need the authorization. And this is some of the things Lisa alluded to. The comment period just closed last week, or maybe it was the week before now. It's nice in the summer when you lose track of time a little bit. But so the guidelines, when they come out, it's going to be very interesting. CARES funding, the state ruled that with an iron fist, but they're not really appearing, initially at least, to be as helpful in terms of navigating the guidance that's coming from the feds. They're basically pushing you in that direction, for clarity. So we're still trying to get our feet under us with everything that's coming down the line in terms of guidance, in terms of money. It's a lot.
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking for all of us. I mean, we've all sat through a couple of these town meetings over the years, especially recently. And, if we tend to be a committee, fortunately and luckily, we tend to come to good consensus and agreements. But whatever we want to get through town meeting, we're going to have to, something large like this, we're going to have to do a sales campaign, to fight for it. So it's going to have to be, whether it's one or two, or maybe a couple bundles of it. We're going to have to go to the mattresses to make sure everybody in the committee knows they need to show up and support it.
Well,
So Joe,
yeah.
sorry, Mark, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. And then I'm done. I think, Joe, it's a great point. And all I will do is point to the public safety facility, because if you tried to get that strictly on a public safety vote alone, I don't think you would have gotten it. But to make it a collaborative effort where you had open space, you had some recreation pieces, you had everybody, the school, everybody's got something out of that project. And that's why it got the resounding vote that it did. It's got to be a collaborative effort. So everyone, I completely agree with you.
Yeah. We also had Main Street that year, so that also helped with that turnout. I just want us all to, and I know that you all think similarly in this, that when we go through this process, that we're all thinking about that, because that's always the every year there's a funny wrench thrown into that meeting, and even with our structure, we couldn't even get that through the meeting, and that was
So let me just clarify one thing is, Mark, your comments seem to be very related to the local aspect of this, right? Southborough is going to receive two checks, right? And it's going to be structured in that. I just want to make sure that you are staying close with Representative Dykema, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which, and I know the board does as well, Lisa, right? But to get guidance on what projects, because we've all heard about this conflict, right, between the governor and the legislative body about who can control the state level funds. I just want to make sure we don't wait too long to advance one or more items for Southborough, because if they're going to write it into a bill as opposed to just release it, we've seen how that has worked in the past, right? With, right, like capital bond bills in particular, right? But the town has benefited, right, from some of those actions, right, when we can clearly define it. So if there is a deadline that we need to get to Representative Dykeman on that level. I get the local level is very complicated, right? You need help to administer that. I would just like that conversation to continue sooner rather than later, especially if it's going to be one item, Lisa, that your board prioritizes. If it's a capital item, we're obviously happy to do the work. If it's another project that's not related to capital, then obviously we trust you'll work with the right people on that. So does that
And the
make
only-
sense, Mark? Lisa?
The only thing I wanted to add to, Joe, is that the money doesn't have to be spent today. We have the opportunity. Isn't it 2024, Mark? I think, isn't that the deadline to
So I
spend?
think you have to spend it, you have to, spend it by 2024 or encumber it by 2024, but I think you've got until 26 to actually have it all spent.
Yes, I mean, we have an opportunity. Point well taken, Joe. It's not always easy to get things done and through town meeting, but it's getting the right projects. So I agree. Thank you.
All right. Lisa, Mark, I'll look to you to let us know when we should have this back on the agenda, if there's anything capital related that comes forward. All right, I'm going to go to item 9, discussion and next steps related to ADA study and self-review. I don't know, Mark or Lisa, if you just want to summarize where the Board of Selectmen left off on this topic. I know you had a very long presentation. I know we were provided with a copy and asked for comments. We discussed in a prior meeting that we didn't have time to digest it and provide comments. And I just urged them before anything capital nature was done that we be consulted. So I don't know where you're at and where you're going, but just I think it'd be helpful for us to understand that so that we can understand where to plug in or not plug in.
Go ahead, Mark. You can take this one.
Yeah, I was afraid of that. Thank you. So the consultant for the Center for Living and Working and Central Mass Regional Planning Commission presented before the Board of Selectmen as part of to gain public comment for the draft ADA self-evaluation and transition plan. Fairly comprehensive document, and the consultant that did the work, Center of Living and Working, really great, great in-depth, report. Bottom line, there's probably about $750,000 worth of improvements, that are on the table. A lot of them have to do with recreation fields and properties. Our building's in pretty good shape. Good news, public safety facility had about $200 in upgrades we need to do. So I mean, a lot of our buildings are in pretty good shape, but things like replacing all of the door handles, because a lot of them are the knobs, and they need to be the handles so that they could be more easily grabbed, things like that. So the report, we'll be getting the final report. The consultant will now take the comments and bring back a final version of the report. We will file that with the Mass Office of Disability. And now we are now eligible for grants from the Mass Office of Disability. They have a grant program every year. I think the grant awards are in the range of probably $30,000 to $50,000. We also, because the town has accepted the complete streets, and the selectmen did that, I believe, last year. That now opens us up to additional grant funding for those type of things. So if we want to look to implement some of the sidewalk recommendations that were in the plan, we can look to do that. I think CPC is probably a good place to start looking at some of the field improvements that we need to do. And then obviously every year we look at the facilities maintenance article. Right now it's been $100,000 a year. John Parent and his staff do a lot of work in-house. We've got a lot of really talented craftspeople, that we employ. And so we've been using their resources to help do some amazing things in the townhouse that now that we're open again, you can come in and see. And so using that fund to help do some of these smaller items and take some of these items off the list, is what we're looking to do. I think, and Lisa can correct me, I think we need to do an evaluation at least, staff wise, and sit down and see what are the things that we can do quickly. What are the things that we can do out of existing facilities maintenance funds? And then, here are the bigger items that are going to have to be scheduled, and I think that's where capital will come in to help and try and schedule these in years out in the plan. You got to remember, this is not something that has to happen, in the next 10 months. They're talking about some of these plans, they're very incremental. If someone files a complaint against you for a lack of accessibility or an issue, they're going to look at your plan and they're going to say, when was your self-evaluation transition plan done? It was done in 2021. It's 2024. You haven't done anything. You've really made no progress whatsoever on any of your buildings, any of your issues. That's where you tend to get in trouble. So we need to be showing that we're making progress, on these things. But some of the bigger issues are things that I think that capital will be, helpful to schedule, and then we can talk about funding sources. The other issue, and maybe this is where I throw it back at Jason, is we've got this space needs study going on, and you're looking at these buildings. Okay, so I'm not sure we want to spend a whole lot of time in, maybe, the senior center in Corderville Hall, or at South Union, or at the playground. Andrew had mentioned earlier, not all playgrounds, you don't have the money usually to make all of them accessible. Maybe the playground at South Union isn't the one you want to start putting all this money in to make it accessible, if in fact we're looking at doing something different with that property. So those are all things I think that need to be taken into account.
Anyone have anything to add? Questions, comments?
I was going to say amen, because I think that he's right on the mark with, stalling a lot of this for a year or two until our we've cooked these pots that we have on the stove and settled into the decisions we need to make. And then, putting the money into place makes perfect sense. But it'd be a shame if we start throwing some money into these places that that we're going to do some changes to.
I mean, Townhouse isn't, I'm sorry, Townhouse isn't going anywhere. Library's not going anywhere. Look at the buildings that, really are not on the table to be, to maybe have the use changed or be disposed of. So, I agree, look at that. That's got to play into the discussion as well.
Mark, what about, based on the space needs study, I mean, and what Jason's working on with the schools, it looked like Woodward was not scoped into this. Do you know what types of costs would be associated with that?
So Jeff, that's the addendum.
Okay.
That's the addendum. The consultant had said, I believe, I'm kind of looking at Lisa and she's not looking at me. So I'll go alone on this one. I forget if it was the beginning of November or the end of November. The consultant said all of the school work and the evaluation work will be done in the schools by, I'm going to say November 30th. And so at that point, we'd have a good idea of what we would need to do in our schools.
I'll just add just a quick reminder on Woodward versus Neri. If you remember when Context did a high-level review back in November of the suitability for those for reuse, they did indicate that the building code that was in place at the time Woodward was constructed means that it's likely in very good ADA compliance unless something was missed there, versus Neri, completely different story. And had some good examples, I think, when he came to talk to us. Obviously not a full ADA study, et cetera, but it sounds like we're well on our way to understanding every doorknob that needs to be changed and, getting to the right answer.
Yeah, if I can go back and say one more thing. I would also, when we're talking about doing the ADA compliance on any fields, go back to the rec field study plan that really got dismantled at one of the town meetings and see what pieces of that can be put back in with when they're doing ADA changes, slip some of those back in because there were things like an AstroTurf field and some other things that made perfect sense for the field plan that got taken apart, that if we're making big changes due to the ADA compliance and spending that kind of money, maybe it's time to make the upgrade at that point.
Thanks, Joe. Karen, were you trying to say something?
Yeah, just one question for Mark. At some point, is there a kind of a roadmap put together of all the ADA suggestions and the time frame in which we might implement it and the cost and the funding. Just interested in that process element.
Yeah, I'm interested in that too. That's something we're gonna, we're gonna have to be tasked with to try to, I think the quickest thing, and I think Marty Healy was the one at the meeting is talking about buckets, putting things in buckets. So we've got to put things into the buckets for, Joe, Jeff, I'm not sure, had, basically let's take these things and put them to the side because these are buildings under consideration in separate studies. This bucket are all of these things that facilities feels that they can take care of sometime, in the remaining, 10 months of this fiscal year, 11 months of this fiscal year. This bucket is going to be these items that are really large dollar amount items. We should give these to capital to try to have them slot these in the capital plan somewhere and then begin to explore with CPC, with funds and everything. And then also try to identify, these are things we're being given guidance on that are eligible for grants. And, we should be putting this in, I think the biggest thing we want to do is show progress. We have a plan, our deficiencies are identified. We know where, we have problems. And by the way, one of the questions that I asked at the meeting, I think it may have been the only question, we talked for an hour and a half about where we're deficient. And I was curious. I said, you've done 30 of these. Where do we fall? Are we better than most? Are we worse than most? Are we about average? And they said, you're actually better than most in terms of what you have, as you sit today. And, so that, made us feel pretty good.
Yeah, that's encouraging. Thanks, Mark.
Anyone else on that one? All right, I'm good. Item 10, approval and distribution to department heads for FY22 requests, review of 10-year plan and form for submission. So let me outline what I was planning to do and ask for feedback on the process. Then we can go into the forms themselves that were shared in advance and are available on the town website. My thought was, assuming we come to some sort of consensus tonight, between Mark, Brian, and myself, we draft an email to all department heads asking them to do the following things. One, they'll get an email with what's in the capital plan currently for FY22 to FY, I believe, 31, for them to validate that it's all encompassing and to submit recommendations for whether the years need to change, the amounts need to change, and or in addition to that final year, which would be FY32, to give us a 10-year plan. Everyone would get that regardless of whether they have something in the capital plan or not, right? Just so that if Department A doesn't have any capital requests now, they aren't a frequent requester, but all of a sudden something's popped up, they have the opportunity to submit it. And then to the extent that they have an item that they're requesting in FY22, so the annual town meeting coming up in March of 22 or March of 23, they would then also have to submit this standardized form, whether it be a vehicle or non-vehicle form, to outline their request in a consistent pattern, in a consistent format that all department heads would have to abide by, so that when someone comes to the committee to walk through their capital plan, in particular their upcoming next 2 years, we have kind of a general guideline of what we're expecting to see. And the department head is kind of on notice with what we want to see, so that there's not 10 meetings of back and forth unless we've kind of sent something back to the drawing board. So as part of that communication, I was also planning to attach the Board of Selectmen adopted capital policy, because as we all know, it goes beyond just general fund uses, so that we can make sure we're capturing everything and making sure we're thinking about and coordinating with Mark, Brian, and their team about appropriate use of which funds, here or there or somewhere else, to make sure that, similar to a lot of the discussions we had last year, I think we got all the capital items we had recommended, but it was, a lot of the different sort of view on how do you structure a payment on it. That was critically, I think, important to passing some of those. So that was going to be the intent. So what I want to do is entertain comments on process first, and then we can go to the actual forms themselves. So I'm not going to go in any order, but if anyone has comments on the process that they want to weigh in on, let me know. Take silence as general approval of the process. Just making sure I'm still connected. Okay. How does everyone feel of a deadline in and around September 1st for that? So that would give them 30 plus at least calendar days to complete it. And obviously, if there is a department head that doesn't feel like they could meet that, they could obviously seek additional time and ask to go kind of at the end of our review with departments for the fall.
Again, Jason, is this excluding schools? I know we never really touched on that last year.
No, Greg's gonna come before us. He has some items brewing outside of what we've been discussing that he'd like to discuss.
Do we think
So
they'll
yeah,
be
schools
ready
will be
by
involved.
September 1st? Do you think they'll be ready by September 1st? Schools?
They maintain a capital plan. They actually have their own capital planning committee. It's a subcommittee of the school committee. They have a capital plan. But my guess is their presentation around it for the local level is going to be highly contingent upon the item that's being detailed researched. I think where we haven't focused, where Greg wants to spend some time with us, is at the regional level, to educate us on what Northrow's doing on some items. So that's going to be upcoming. He'll come to a meeting to talk about that. He already has agreed to that.
Jason, the 1st is a Wednesday. Do we want to pick like either a Friday or Sunday or something?
I prefer to do a weekday, just to, and I also was trying to stay away from the holiday weekend, and also recognize that Fridays are not full days for some department heads, depending upon which department they are. So I'm also happy to go back a week, like back to, or for, I mean, that was just an arbitrary date to allow us to start to work through this in September and give the committee time to review what I imagine will take the department head some time to complete, depending upon who they are and what level of capital they have.
Jason, can I ask Mark a question?
Go ahead.
So based on a 30-day deadline, I don't know, Mark, I mean, typically in the summer, employees and as well as taxpayers plan a lot of vacations. And I don't know where you think a 30-day deadline may fall with department heads and vacations that you've signed off on for the month of August. I want someone to be able to enjoy their vacation. If pushing this out a week buys us a little bit of window, then I might be interested to hear that.
I guess it depends on what new items people have coming forward, Lisa. Some people are going to take a look at the plan and say, I had a couple of things this year. I'd rather take something out that was 2 years down the road and switch it back in and move something else out. I think a lot of it is moving pieces more than it is adding new things in. So I guess I would, you could give it, I do completely agree with you. People disappear in the summer. And now that people are allowed to take vacations and go places a little bit, you're seeing people taking advantage of that as well. So you could move it out a week or two. But if you don't move it out a week or two, I think you need to be ready to have some level of leniency on a case-by-case basis. Yeah, again, it's going to be the same departments. There's really 5 or 6 departments that are looking for things.
So how about we do September 10th, which is 4 days after Labor Day. And I have a hunch that some departments will be done well in advance of that, and we just start with them.
I think there are some departments you may want to tell September 1st and really have them in by September 10th, but we can talk about that offline.
What I was going to offer, because I think we can all guess the departments that are going to need, just of someone to vet and kind of help them think about, is this the right time? Is this the right thing? If someone does want a liaison, come back to the committee to just, I'm not going to assign formal liaisons, but if someone's looking to talk to someone just to walk through some items and it's not a department that we've kind of informally liaised with in the past, one of us, then I certainly will offer that out there if someone is looking for just sometimes I have gotten feedback from them that just some of the coaching on the side before a meeting of, what questions may be, what we're hearing from others, just to make sure that they're on a level playing field, has been pretty meaningful. I also think that, Lisa, your comment is also valid for, I'm thinking recreation in particular, and potentially DPW, that are supported by committees or commissions that will allow the department heads in those areas to meet, if they usually do, right? Hopefully, before bringing it forward to us to just, again, another sanity check before it comes forward.
Well,
And
do we want to
Go
set a submission date for materials and then a separate meeting date?
we're not going to set a meeting date yet.
Okay.
What I'm going to do, Joe, is I'm going to monitor how stuff comes in.
Okay.
Right,
I thought we were actually planning sort of a simultaneous. I got it. Okay.
No, because I want to see, I want to make sure we get the right material
Oh,
to
yeah.
facilitate a meeting, and I want to give everyone the time to review it. So, right, if everything shows up on September 9th, then we're not going to meet for at least another 7 to 10 days. But
Okay.
if I start seeing stuff in middle of August, right, and we have half the departments done, I'm going to probably schedule those departments even maybe while the submission period's still open. Because I think the feedback that we got from both Board of Selectmen and advisory last year is it was really helpful to know what was coming in October and November before we got into the full budget cycle, which is why capital didn't become, I'll call it a chopping block at the end, right? Some things did get moved off. A lot of it was because it was funded through other sources. And I think the only thing that really wasn't ready for prime time was sidewalks, if I remember correctly. That's really the only thing I can remember truly getting removed, as opposed to, I'll call it massaged into another area or another fund, et cetera. Okay, so now let's talk about the specific forms, because this is going to be new to all of them. And I think it's important that we're all aligned, that we're going to get the right information. So, Joe, I'm going to let you go first, given that you were the architect of the PDF form. What I attempted to do, given my familiarity with the back end of what we use for the town website, is I experimented with fillable PDFs, and that wasn't going too well. So I pivoted to a mechanism that creates a public record, but also gives enough leeway for the department head to do whatever he or she thinks is necessary in their submission, and really provide parameters of really where we're looking for responses and not. So I took your thing and adapted it into the format that I could work with. So out of true, I guess, for all the work you did to create the backbone of it, I want you to go first and offer any comments. I don't know if you want to start with vehicles or non-vehicles first. You call the ball on this.
Well, as I said to you in my reply email, I said, I thought it really hit pretty much all the topic wise, all the stuff that we had talked about. There was nothing glaring that I saw that that shined on me. There were only a couple little things. One was that we might, depending if we were gonna have private citizens at some point using these forms, might have been useful to just put it a department head or citizen, just in case that happened. I guess
can you walk me through a scenario where you could see that happening? Because I was thinking a department head would normally initiate a process on behalf of his or her department.
Right. And this is I would agree with you. This probably wouldn't be a common scenario, but where we see the citizen petitions is the same. We could see the same sort of a thing working for, like when I said, hey, when I tried to use one of my own sort of formats, and I said, what if we wanted, somebody wanted a town pool? And so they wanted to submit a project on their own that they researched and planned out, that they wanted to submit into the committee. Is that something that we were open to? And that's why I said, maybe having a citizen name on there, or the option for a citizen name as opposed to a department head. They still would, if somebody would still want to do it and use the form, they could do that and put their name in there. I was just saying, that's something we would consider putting on there for future, just because at some point somebody is going to want to do that. And every now and then somebody does. Whether they get to that level of submission is the question. But having a formal process for a citizen petition of a capital item, I think is a realistic expectation at some point.
So I have a suggestion on how to thread the needle there. How about I add instructions at the top that this is meant for department head only submission, like on behalf of a department, committee, or commission, and then give them an email link of, hey, I have a capital idea that I really want to see investigated. Let it come, like, that should just be a 1-liner, 2-liner of, I'll use your example, a pool. And then I think we would make, obviously recreation's not going to be surprised by this, given how often it comes up in master plan, but we just send it to the recreation director, copy the chair of the rec commission, and say, we continue to get feedback on this, would welcome your view of whether you're planning to advance anything or not. And then that hopefully closes the loop with citizen A or citizen B. Would that work?
Sure. Yes. I was just looking to throw that out there. Whatever solution is realistic. This is, like I said, this is just small potatoes of things that I thought that might be useful. I think that we were also assuming that the 10K threshold was met. Because that wasn't written in, but I assume that if we're dealing with only department heads, that'll be there. I would like to see under the select how your project fits section. It'd be interesting if you added a option for a social interest project of historical, education, or recreation nature. That'd be a nice thing to have on there. Just because those do pop up. Let's see.
So on that, Joe, I have no objection to that. These are literally copy and paste from the capital plan.
Oh, sure. No. Like I said, this is all just ways that I think it would enrich. I thought you covered most of all the.
No, that's what I'm saying is if the committee wants to do that, then we should adjust the capital policy.
Okay. It would be interesting. Well, some of this stuff, wait a minute, let me, of the notes that I wrote for you, there are only a couple that are really necessary for this discussion. Under the describe and quantify any revenue that this project may create. There was a question sort of down in the second half, I believe. It would be great if that included or costs that may be recouped or avoided in the future. In that same section, that would be nice, just because I think that plays on the same note, but in a different scenario. And then on the vehicle form, the only thing different from above would be add an increase, decrease operational cost consideration caused by the acquisition or the operation of the equipment. So if it was offsetting, if it was getting rid of some other costs, that would be nice to know. Or if it was decreasing maintenance costs in an area, that would be good to know. I think you had some places where somebody could input that, but having a direct question that addresses that would just make it more clear that we wanted that information. And also under the vehicle form, and this, I don't know how everybody would feel about this one, but I think with equipment, especially, we have regulatory and environmental concerns, special permissions and permits that are sometimes required for equipment or its use or the personnel that use them. And it'd be nice to know, because those would be additional costs that might be incurred and that may not have been included in the actual cost of the vehicle. So we know sort of a more in an operational sense what the costs might be moving forward. Other than that, I mean, I don't see anything absolutely necessary. Having a timeline for the purchases and expenses, that's usually something, as we found out through some of these things, gets altered later. So I'm not sure that I thought leaving those out was very appropriate in that way. Depending if everybody else thought that was,
They weren't left out on purpose, so let's talk about that. So, I guess on the timeline, you're saying, like, for example, we talked last year about how long it takes to build a fire truck or how long it takes to procure that hook lift truck. And that was pre-pandemic and everything we're all seeing with passenger vehicles now, right? So, Joe, that was not on purpose. So unless someone objects, I think we should probably put a timeline in there, just even if it's rough bullets of, hey, I can spend the money on July 1st. I'm not going to see it in a garage or in a station for 18 months, 12 months, 6 months, because that obviously factored into some of our decisions, I think, this year in terms of timing.
yeah. The only other thing I saw in the vehicle purchase, and this is completely unnecessary to put in, but we always have to take it into account, as we did with the tractor recently at the transfer station, was the urgency of the request. Whether it's one of those things we need to address now, or whether it's a request that we're just going to put into the plan. But we can evaluate that coming in. That's not something that the department head necessarily has to put on there. It's just whether we might want that on the request when it's filed for public information.
Okay.
But no, I thought it was good. I did. It covered most all the boxes that we'd had.
Other comments, questions?
I just had just a couple things. So I think these are great. I think it levels the playing field in terms of expectations and just standardized formats, just to make it, even across the board, that everyone's kind of getting the same kind of fair shake in terms of adding to the capital plan. Joe, you took my point on urgency. I thought that was really important, and the timeline as well. But the only question I had is just a fiscal year requested. FY22, is that even relevant anymore? Should we be doing 23 and 24 at this point? 22.
I guess I should define what it should be for, I guess the first payment could be no earlier than FY23. We should stipulate the town meeting it's for, because it's a good comment. I guess what I hadn't fully closed the door on FY22 yet, because we all know there's a special town meeting. Now, no one has brought anything forward. The rescue boat was approved. So that's moving forward and not going to be a separate item. So, I was weary, I guess, of one school item that may come from the regional level that may not require funding, but it may slot in. So I will define that, Jeff. That's a good comment.
To add on to that one, Jeff, would you rather see a box where they're inputting that number or checking, or a series of numbers where they're checking off, or
in terms of the fiscal year? No, I think if we have too many options where they can input text, I think that's where we're gonna have a lot of questions. If we can have dialogue boxes that we have to select, that's a lot better in my opinion. But you talk about the urgency, Joe, or the fiscal year?
Well, I'm just thinking moving forward, like if somebody comes to us and says that they want to move sort of a purchase in our timeline from, say, 26 to 28, is that something that we want to come through on one of these forms, or do we want them to just say it?
I think my interpretation, this is all short term, right? This is going to be anything.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
So they'll submit a written request in their own format of what they want to change. I mean, my goal is there's not a heck of a lot of changes here, but
Sure.
there could be some.
Yeah, I just didn't know whether we were taking this as a formal, short, town meeting type of a thing, or versus a plan type of issue.
My view was short term, Joe, because
Sure.
I was
Okay,
trying to
good.
envision myself as a department head that has vehicles every year.
Mhm.
Just say, I don't know when we need to give them 5 months, 6 months to draft this up.
Yeah.
So what I was trying to do is get us something to work with for this year, and then their legwork is likely going to be a lot easier for years after this, especially if they have repetitive, like the police chief is, once he gets his cruiser thing, right, which he already has a pretty good format, he'll just have to adapt that to his facts for next year. Jeff, did you have anything else? I just note we lost Lisa, but we still have a quorum, so we'll keep going.
No, I think this is great though, otherwise.
I have one question. I'm not sure if this is appropriate for these questionnaires. I'm just wondering if it makes any sense to have a question about, was there any opportunity to consider an energy efficient or low carbon option for this vehicle or piece of equipment?
I think that's absolutely an option. Everyone support that?
I have no problem with it. There is one, if I remember, I'm not sure which form it was. There was a question about reducing power. I thought that question
That
was
was in
slanted.
the general one, not the vehicle
Yeah.
one.
Jason,
Yeah,
I was
but-
actually thinking those conditions from the non-vehicle one actually kind of make sense for the vehicle one. I was gonna bring that up, like results in
Yeah.
lower energy consumption, would be a good one for the hybrid police cruiser kind of thing.
So basically just copy that question over is what you're suggesting, Andrew.
Yeah, that's what I would suggest, yeah.
Well, that actually also plays into the add question that I had said before with the increase, decrease of operational cost consideration. So those two questions will work in tandem. Might not need both.
Okay. All right. So Karen, your suggestion on that, you said vehicle, but I assume you mean both, right? Like
I
if
do
we're
mean
gonna go,
both, right?
okay. All right. So I heard from Joe, I heard from Jeff. Andrew, did you have anything else?
The only other one is, I don't know if we want to link to these on our website. Right, anybody could submit these and kind of corrupt the data a bit. So I think we can have it on the website, but maybe not. There's no link from a capital planning perspective, and we just email the link to the department heads.
We can do that. There's also a way for them to, if they're a town employee, and this goes to Joe's comment of Joe or Jane, that want to submit in. I believe they all have access. They can log into the town website using some credential. We could work with IT on that. That's a good comment.
Yeah, just to, I don't want somebody putting something in on behalf of, Chief Paulus, and he go, I didn't put that in there.
Yeah.
Side markup for a bunch of new Ferraris and fun stuff.
Karen, I got your one comment. Did you have anything else?
No. Otherwise, it looks good. I like the format, straightforward, simple. It's easy to complete.
The only other one I had, Jason, is what is the output? Does it come, like, how does it come out, and can we format it relatively easy and more of like a PowerPoint type proposal that we can kind of review at town meeting, et cetera, et cetera?
So you can download it into, like, we would be able to take any verbiage and put it into Excel and copy paste, or actually view it as a form. You'd like get like a PDF. So I think we'd be able to work with it. Obviously, there's going to be something that doesn't work the right way or the way we intend it, right? So I'm hoping that the department heads will be honest, right? And I think that'll be part of the messaging too. Is like, if you're messing around with something and it's not working, like, just call us, right? And we'll help figure it out. But vice versa, streamline some of the questions or I'm sure we'll get some requests for interpretation from some, but I also may ask a department head or two just to put one item in, before the blast goes out, just as a sanity check. Maybe not have them add pictures or something like that, just as a quick last check. I know Joe had met with some of the department heads already in terms of gathering the questions and looking at some other examples they had. So hopefully it'll be received. And I had shared this with Brian as well for his feedback of how he would view it if he were a department head. And he had informed some of how it's presented as well.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. Lisa will not be rejoining us, but I think we're at the end here almost. So the next item is scheduling OPM interviews for the Townhouse project. So Mr. Parent and Ms. Esposito have selected 3 firms that they'd like to see interviewed. So we need to set a date and go from there. So preference is August, but I'm also weary of the conversation we just had about everyone having different commitments in August. He's really just looking for a forum, for a broader group and to do in public, just like we did the others, same structure that we did for the space needs, et cetera. So I'll probably send out a few proposed dates to the committee, or if anyone wants to email me non-starter dates. I realize, Andrew, you're probably a little up in the air. Jeff, I think you had mentioned some vacation. Joe, Karen, Lisa, I'm sure obviously have other things. So if you can just send me dates that will not work, like if you're like just out for a week or, et cetera, we can try to plan it from there. Cause then I also need to work around John's schedule, because then it's important, obviously, that he be in attendance and part of the, the panel that we put together. So if you kind of time that out, it'll be about an hour and a half meeting. With that, I will go to public comment as part of other business in case there's any comment. I didn't see any hands raised throughout, but I'll just do a call for public comment. Mark, you have your hand up. I was like,
Just test and make sure you're paying attention.
I was like, oh, one of the
I have one, actually one quick thing, Jason.
Sure.
I emailed Ryan and Marguerite for the library about the library project we discussed last week. And I had been thinking it was about the project that we had discussed, but Ryan came back to me and said, well, is this really that you want to sort of get in and look at all the things that are going on with the facade project, as that's what's really currently on their on the fryer for them. And so when we discussed last meeting about me looking into it, I don't think that we actually clearly defined which project I should really be looking at. But if they're willing to invite me
you
to
need to
look
go
at
to John Parent. So it's a facilities project. It just
that
happens to
may
be in
be-
the library.
well, that's a fun, that may be so, but should I really be looking at maybe both of these projects, the first one going on now to get a feeling of how this goes, and then the second one afterwards?
No, because that was approved before we were around, and we kind of remember the Board of Selectmen give us we went to them for consent on which projects we were going to have. We used the term collaborate with department heads. I think while it is in the library building, that's actually a facilities project.
Okay, because that came back and I sort of went, oops.
Yeah. Yeah. If you have any questions, I mean, I'd go to jump in. I don't even know if they've started yet or what the status is there.
No, I'm willing to keep my nose out of it. I just thought it was funny that somebody stuck me to it and I didn't have an answer.
Yeah. And I have not heard back from Recreation on Calander yet. So that's why it hasn't come back up. Okay. So in terms of next meeting, send me days to avoid. Obviously, if you come back and say, no, I can't do that time of that day, but just major days to avoid because of vacations, et cetera. And then that will be our August meeting. And then we will reconvene in September and come up with a regular review schedule for all these department head inputs. Does that make sense? All right. Any other business? All right. I will make a motion to adjourn at 8:59 p.m. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Karen, you get the second. There's a three-way tie. We'll do a roll call vote. Start with Hark.
Aye.
Palmer.
Aye.
Pfaff.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye.
And Malinowski